Mary Lou Jepson is a great member of the Techonomy community. I'm super pleased that she's going to be on our stage. She's done things here before, but she's got a really great presentation today from her company, Open Water. Mary Lou.
Hi. So medical imaging is used to diagnose millions of cancers, billions of cancers over the last 30 years, and many diseases in our body. Those are the medical imaging suites, the multi-million-dollar machines many of you have probably laid in. They haven't improved substantially in 3 decades. They're expensive and hard to use. And so what I'm trying to do is actually massively lower the cost and the size of medical imaging systems so that we can see inside of our bodies and brains. And I think that can have a transformative impact on our health. And the question is why now? How can we do it now? And I think the tools of our time are ready for this now. Big data, machine learning, and the often overlooked trillion-dollar manufacturing infrastructure of Asia, where I've lived and breathed shipping products on the hairy edge of imaging now for about 3 decades. So I'm taking all of my imaging knowledge where I've shipped all kinds of new display systems, laptops, HD TVs, projectors, virtual reality, augmented reality sets. I'm using that work, displays and camera chips, to be able to see inside of our bodies in high resolution, which sounds a little nutty, so let me explain to you a bit of how this works. But first, I'm talking about literally replacing this big iron machine with a ski hat or a bandage that can go around your body and see in higher resolution for about 1,000 times lower cost, about 1 million times smaller, and potentially 1 billion times higher resolution. So that's a lot of zeros. It's classic innovator's dilemma, and I think the manufacturing supply chain that makes our smartphones, TVs, laptops is ready to take it on because of some manufacturing process improvements that have been put in place literally in the last couple of years to enable next generation high fidelity, virtual reality, and augmented reality. And so how does this work? Can we turn down the lights a little bit? So our bodies are translucent to red light. You can see red light goes right through my hand here. Gamma rays and X-rays also go through my body. So do 2-ton magnetic fields. But guess which one's cheaper? By a lot. And so here's the thing, though. If I take this laser and point it on this table, you can see that makes a spot. But when it goes through my hand, it scatters. So we have to do something about the scattering to be able to see deep inside of our bodies at high resolution. And so what I figured out to do, oh, wow, I thought you were seeing the slides I was on. I'm trying to figure out, this is our body's translucent. So we descatter the light using holography, which records actually the waves in the wavelength of light and the interference of them. And I actually spent the first 10 years of my career making holograms and actually holographic video and electroholography. To record a hologram, you need a very fine pixel size, a pixel size on the order of the wavelength of light. And that's just been enabled in the trillion-dollar manufacturing infrastructure for next generation high fidelity VR and AR, because when you put on your VR and AR sets, the pixels look kind of chunky. So billions of dollars has been spent to enable us to record holograms in camera chips. So that's the second key. First key is our body is translucent to red light, scatters it. We can descatter the light with holography. And then the third key is leveraging ultrasonic scanning. So ultrasonic chips are now being made in every single silicon fab in the world using a process called MEMS, micro electromechanical systems, that was developed for projection displays by Texas Instruments in the 90s. So fast forward 30 years later, and we can take an ultrasonic ping and focus it down into the brain at that spot, and then bring in red light. And the light that goes through that ultrasonic focus changes color ever so slightly, just like the pitch of a police car siren changes as it speeds past you, Doppler shift. So we can then change the color of the light in a light guide plate underneath. These black discs represent ultrasonic and camera chips in an array with a network of fiber optics illuminating it. But if I turn on my smartphone, you see the light comes straight out, even though the light comes in from the side. That's called a light guide plate. That's what we do to create what's called a reference beam and a hologram. We beat two beams off of each other to get information about that ultrasonic spot where the wavelength shifted. Because we have this fine pixel structure, we can see the interference we call fringes. We couldn't see that if the pixel size was bigger. And then we decode that, much like Rosalind Franklin decoded this iconic image of X-ray diffraction for the first time to reveal the structure of DNA. It took her a long time. She didn't get credit for it, but we try. But we can now do that at 1 million times a second using double-stack camera chips, where the first layer senses the light, switches it to digital. The second layer does image processing. So we do it for the engineers in the audience. We do a 2D discrete Fourier transform super fast on that logic chip. And then we scan the next spot out. And doing this, we can scan out spot by spot the body or brain. We can go in a line, or we can go with software reconfigurable ultrasonic pings. We can change the frequency and thus the focus size. We can look at areas of interest, not totally scan the thing over and over. And you're probably thinking, what about skull? Well, light goes straight through skull. It's white, it scatters. That's real human skull. Order from skullsunlimited.com. Yeah, it goes, the speed of sound changes in skull, but we can compensate for the change in speed of sound. And there's this thing that we're really good at seeing. We can see blood, and blood is pretty important. Red light absorbs blood, and flesh scatters it, and we can see the difference. You can see the difference in this slide. And that's a really big deal, because any tumor that metastasizes steals blood from your body. And so tumors that are cancerous have 5 times the amount of blood as normal tissue. It steals the blood so it can grow and try to kill you. So you can see that, we can see that. So there's also, using this simple system, we've been able to see in optically mimicking phantoms that we created using camera chips and lasers and ultrasonic pings to see vasculature and tumors we embedded. And we've gone further. We can see the color change blood makes, whether it's carrying oxygen or not carrying oxygen. It's actually a different color. The absorption properties change. So we use a laser with 2 colors coming out of it so we can see whether the blood's carrying oxygen or not, which is exactly what multi-million-dollar fMRI does, which is a video form of MRI that is very useful for many different forms of brain disease. So we can do that too. And we think we can see it faster than fMRI because there's a faster sub-second response. It usually takes 4 seconds to capture an fMRI scan of the brain, but we see a sub-second response optically that we're capturing. And for the first 1.5 years of the company, I didn't focus on product. I just wanted to know what the limits of the physics were. So we hit fMRI resolution, which is 10 cubic millimeters, then MRI resolution, which is about 1 millimeter cubic. Kept going. And we got to a couple cubic microns, which is a millionth of a meter or 1,000 times finer than a millimeter. But that's in X, Y, and Z. So it's 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 or 1 billion times higher resolution, potentially. So that means that we can focus down to neurons themselves, non-invasively through skull and brain, as I showed live on stage at TED this year in Vancouver. And that's just mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing to us because if you couple that with work that's been using near-infrared light to both read the state of neurons and write the state of neurons, that's pretty transformative in what it can do for our ability to understand the brain with this tool that we're creating. But back to life. So I did all that with this huge lab-sized prototype because if any chip designer worth their salt has gotten thrown out of fabs in the world because they didn't ship enough products. So what you do is you jerry-rig systems and prototype with existing chips while you architect the chips that you need to reduce it. So we spent a long time doing that with lots of different big iron setups like this. And now we've architected these new components of camera chips, ultrasonic chips, and a new kind of laser that is a strobe laser, and that's necessary, or a so-called pulse laser, but it's a slow pulse. It's like a microsecond pulse, and that's because we're alive, we move. It's good to be alive, but we have to strobe it. So this is the system we have now. We're scanning rats in a small animal imaging facility in San Francisco, and we're MRIing the rats and then scanning the rats. We also get whatever's on sale at the meat market and scan that. We've recently, pork chops and chicken, and I've got some pig brain a couple weeks ago. So 10 times less. These are the recent improvements we've made in the last 6 months. And these are order of magnitude improvements that we keep going on. We're working on alpha kits for next summer, but we're waiting to freeze the architectures where we stop getting these big improvements in both signal and noise ratio, which is important. We want more signal, less noise to see deep, and lowering the amount of light needed, because that has things. So I was talking around the fire with Wael, who will be up here later, who had a big role in the Arab Spring, about a lot of the ethical, and a bunch of the Technonomy crew last night around one of the fires. We skipped the music, sorry, but it was lovely. And they gave me a hard time about brain-computer communication in a really way I could hear it. And the question is, do we want to be able to communicate, and what are the ethical rules on that? And what we have agreed to do is not do that until we can define what it means to be responsible there. But nonetheless, we're building systems that can see inside of our body and brain. And so just quickly, using existing MRIs, students that are thrown into MRI machines for hundreds of hours while recordings are made of their brain. This was work by Professor Jack Gallant at UC Berkeley. The computer is then able, it stopped, sorry, but usually it runs through. Hopefully, if I go back and then forward. The students, there we go. Thank you back there. The computer is able to infer a grainy image of what the students are actually thinking by getting a data store with some low accuracy. But if you up the resolution and make MRI cheaper, and it's more comfortable than putting a ski hat. In Japan, a group did this with dreams by waking up the students 3 minutes after they fell asleep and asking them what they were dreaming about to create the data store, and used machine learning backpropagation to then infer what they were dreaming when they fell asleep. The accuracy of this is, for example, this word cloud back at UC Berkeley, 5% false positive threshold on a word cloud, even the sex and violence area. So if we do develop this, we could maybe not, if we didn't wish to communicate thoughts of sex and violence to each other, we could turn that part off. And in terms of accuracy, here's a study from a decade ago. 1,000 images were double flashed, double shown to students laying in MRI machines. And with 80% accuracy, the machine learning algorithm could infer what the student was looking at or thinking of, because when you think of an image, the same area lights up in your head. And by the way, through random guess, that's 0.1%, so a really big difference. So the bet here is that massively more data, higher resolution with increased temporal response, and better algorithms, we can get to more resolution that we think can have profound impact on people that suffer from brain disease, lock-in, stroke victims, and so forth. But the really big thing, the elephant in the room, is 2/3 of humanity lacks access to medical imaging. And that's actually all of us. If you look at mammography, for example, that's screening for breast cancer for women. We know MRI is 10 times better, but we don't use it in the US for routine screening, and not a single country in the world uses it for routine screening for one reason: it's too expensive. And then you even have people, I loved how David Kirkpatrick introduced the health panel yesterday with talking about susceptibility for innovation in healthcare. And he was talking about sectors in the US, but the question is the US the most susceptible for innovation of healthcare in the world? I believe it's other countries that are more susceptible. And so we're really reaching out to them. And there's a biological basis for brain disease. 2 billion people suffer from brain disease if you add in mental disease and neurodegenerative disease. But they're not giving fMRIs, and yet they're just asked questions like, are you sleeping all the time? Have you gained weight? Do you have thoughts of suicide? If you answer yes to that and another litany of questions, you're clinically depressed. And then how's your therapy going? When you take a pill, does it change? It's subjective. I mean, I was talking to these people that try to figure out if the schizophrenics taking the meds are getting better or worse, and it's confusing. And we can see the signature of just different brain disease with an fMRI scan, but we don't do that in any, so precision psychology could be enabled. We can also focus the ultrasound for longer than a microsecond. If we focus it for 15 seconds, we can do surgery without the knife, ablate tissue, open the blood-brain barrier, deliver microdoses of drugs, but with the right intensity at the right place. And we're working with the Focused Ultrasound Foundation on that, who's really shepherding through this for lots of different indications. FDA is rather straightforward. The predicate products to using near-infrared light and ultrasound are decades old. The safety limit's well established. And we're building up our image stores, comparing our rats and then humans with MRIs. So I think this is inevitable. It's thrilling to talk to you about it here. I'd love to talk to you all about how we might be able to shape it. It's far bigger than me or my company, Open Water.